Hi, I'm Brett Johnson, former United States most wanted cyber criminal, now good guy, and host of the Brett Johnson Show on YouTube. Today's episode 43, Crime Pays, when we come back. All right, so we are back to the Brett Johnson Show, episode 43, Crime Pays. You may think it doesn't. You may have been told by any number of people that crime don't pay, but that is the biggest lie in the world. Okay, maybe not the biggest lie in the world, but it's a big lie. The truth of the matter is that crime does indeed pay. And we're going to talk about that when we get to that part of the show. But as you know, we talk about other things before we get to that. We do viewer comments, some other stuff as well. People may not understand, but I did not put out an episode on Friday. I had meant to put out an episode on Friday, but I was traveling. I went on a plane trip to Hawaii for a week. For business, for pleasure, for both. For both. I went for AARP. For those who may not know, I'm an ambassador for AARP. I'm a fraud expert. Of course I'm a fraud expert. Hell, I helped invent modern day cybercrime. You may as well call me the father of modern cybercrime. No one else wants to claim it. By God, I'll claim it. That being said, let's go over into viewer comments. So viewer comments, let's see what we're into. Those who watch my show, there's a lady that I was talking, that I've addressed a couple of times on my show. She was scheduled to be married in September of this year. She called the wedding off because her fiance is not only addicted to cocaine, but addicted to crack cocaine. He's been using it several times. He's been lying to her for years about it. She's forgiven him a couple of times, even was scheduled to be married to the gentleman, called the marriage off because she found out once again he was using this drug. He's an addict. She reached out to me because I made this statement, and I believe in this, that if you're addicted to something, whether it be drugs, gambling, crime like I was, gaming, whatever that is, if you're addicted to something, you put the addiction in front of every single thing in your life. Other relationships, your job, everything. You cannot love anything if you have an addiction because the addiction comes first. All right. So she reached out to me because of that, because I used to be addicted to crime. Still am. I'm recovering from that. I'm not addicted to crime. I was, but I really think I'm over that hump. That doesn't mean I have blinders on. I still know what it would take for me to go back to commit crime. But I'm no longer tempted to engage in criminal activity. So she reached out to me because I used to be that addict, addicted to crime, and also because I had a fiance that was addicted to drugs as well. So I've seen both sides of that. And I gave her some advice. The advice, hey, don't get married. She already knew that. She already knew everything. She just needed she needed somebody to say it. Sometimes we need that. We need that affirmation. And so she reached out to me today and was talking about how hard a time I guess a friend or a relative got married over the weekend. And she was having a very hard time dealing with that because this lady's supposed to be married next month. And she was just sharing that with me. And I told her I would address it on this show. And the only thing I've got to say is you're going to be okay. You are. I mean, you may think you're not. You may not want to be. You may think the world's ending. But the thing about life is it goes on whether you want it to or not. That's the thing. And I don't mean to sound trite in that because that is not an easy thing at all. It's not. I've had enough bad things happen to me and that I've done that I've been the guy I don't want it to go on. You know, I don't want things to change. I don't want to get past this. But you do. The thing I can say to you is that I don't know how this relationship will end. I don't know if you guys will, in the future, maybe get back together. I don't know about that. I don't know if you guys will be friends, if you guys will be enemies. I don't know. But what I do know is that what you learn from this relationship will benefit you immensely in the next relationship, whether it be with this guy or whoever it is. I know that it will benefit you in every relationship, because here's what I know. I know that your relationship with this guy that you sacrificed a lot. He didn't benefit you financially. He lied to you through the relationship. He used drugs through the relationship, and you accepted that. You put up with it because you wanted that love. You wanted that relationship. There's nothing wrong with that. All right. There's nothing wrong with wanting that love and relationship. But I know that in your next relationship, you'll know, hey, things aren't unconditional. There's always a line in the sand. There is something that you should not, and from now on will not, put up with or accept. And I'm going to tell you, you're a hell of a lot more valuable than what you were giving yourself credit for. There's not a doubt in my mind about that. All right. You have the strength to end it. You just need somebody, you need this some bitch right here to say, hey, it's going to be okay. And you need to end it. And you did the right thing. And you'll know that. I mean, you already know that. But as a little bit more time passes and as life moves on, you'll absolutely realize that it was the best possible choice for you and for him that had happened. It will give him the opportunity to overcome his addiction and turn his life around and become a better person. I mean, that's all we can look for at the end of the day, is we always constantly need to become or strive to become better than we are. My thought on things. All right. Moving right along from that. Kimberly from the Lex Friedman Show, the comment section, people may not know, but I read every comment. I respond to most comments. The only way I won't respond is if you're a complete asshole. That doesn't mean, hey, if they say something negative about me, I won't respond. Most of the negative stuff, I'll respond to that as well. And usually we have a very good conversation. It's only when people are complete and total assholes that, hey, I don't even engage with that. All right. Kimberly, we talked a little bit. Kimberly commented on my statement regarding addiction and addicts not able to love anything except the addiction. She took exception to that. I responded on the comments section. I'll say basically the same thing here, as my feelings is either Kimberly is the addict in that situation, or she loves someone who is an addict, and you're trying to, come to terms with that. He loved me. Well, the problem is that and you say it, they're not able to reciprocate. If he's not reciprocating that love, if he's lying about, or your other half, that person you're in love with is lying in order to continue their addiction, if they're choosing that addiction above you, which is what happens, how can you call that love? You can't. Now, I know that's, speaking from personal experience, that is a very difficult pill to swallow, to accept that. But you've got to understand that. I mean, if not to understand that, to me, is simply making excuses for that person who has that addiction. Doesn't have to be drugs, can be crime, can be gambling, can be any number of things, whatever that addiction is. All right, you have to understand that when an addiction is present, the addiction will always come before the relationship, before the job, before paying your bills, before everything. Randy Hurtado from, again, the Lex Friedman Show. Evidently, he had posted this a few times saying, hey, and I finally read one. He said someone had been removing the comments, but he made the comment that, hey, this guy is like the unsaved version of Dave Ramsey. So I was like, that's kind of cute. I like that, because a few people had said I'm evil Dave Ramsey. So I responded. I said, thank you. And then he responded after that saying, hey, why don't you look at or view this video on YouTube of a bunch of Sturgis motorcycle bikers that get saved. They come to God. I've not watched it yet, Randy. I will. Okay, I give you my word, I will. I want you to understand, though, that I have severe problems with faith. Okay. It has nothing to do with God. I wish that I could have that faith, that belief system. I truly do. I truly do. It's not that I'm not well read. I am well versed in the Testaments, but I just have a severe fundamental problem with faith. I call it the Langston Hughes issue. You know, Langston Hughes was writing this poem about a revival, and all these other children are getting up and they're saying they see Jesus and they're being saved. And Langston continues to sit there because he doesn't see Jesus, and he's waiting to see Jesus, and he doesn't see Jesus. He has a profound lack of faith. I have a lack of faith because of my upbringing, because I had a mother who used religion in very unhealthy, negative, abusive ways. This is a mother who she brings me and my sister into the living room. I couldn't have been any more than 9, 8 years old. She brings me and my sister in the living room. She's got these candles burning. She sits us down, tells us she's sold her soul to Satan, and we have to prove so that we can have a good life. And we have to prove that we're worthy. So the game was we sit across from her, take turns facing her, keeping eye contact, not blinking. She lets Satan come out through her eyes. We're supposed to think happy Jesus thoughts and keep ourselves from being possessed. That's simply one of the issues. And that went on for days, hours at a time. This is a woman who, my dad was a helicopter pilot in the Army. We lived in West Germany for a time. I was very young, 4 or 5. And this is a woman who was convinced, or at least she says she was convinced, that our apartment was possessed. We lived in military housing in an apartment building. She was convinced that our apartment was the epicenter of the evil, that a couple of Jewish people had been slaughtered by the SS and their spirits had taken residence in our apartment. So she makes up this elaborate story, has a seance, scares me and my sister completely to death for months. So I don't blame God for that. This is a human being that did that. But the result is I have severe issues with faith. I wish I could overcome that. I truly hope that one day I'll be able to overcome that and have that belief. And it's not because I think that people who believe in God are ignorant. I don't believe that at all. At all. Doesn't matter what your education level or your knowledge level is. People who are rich, poor, supremely intelligent, supremely stupid, whatever, they all believe in God. It's just that I have not came to that yet, and I hope that I will. Truly, I'll watch the video. You have my word, I will watch it. Okay, and I will ask that you pray for me, that hopefully I get there. And I'm not saying that the answer is, for those who may not be Christians, I'm not saying the answer is Christianity. For my belief system, I tend to borrow from everything. I'm the guy that says Hamdi Allah. You know, I believe in a lot. The way the Islam views God, I like that. I like all these different types of religions, and I tend to take parts of every single one. I don't think there's any one correct one or right one. I think they all do a lot of good, and they can all do a lot of bad as well, as we know. There was a comment from Ross Sauce 12 on, again, the Lex Friedman show. He was talking about how bad my mom was, how bad of a person. And he makes the comment, I hope she has a horrible afterlife. I hope she burns everything else. And I responded to that, and we ended up having a very good conversation in the comment section. And my response is, hey, I don't like my mom. My mom is honestly not a very good person, but I love my mother. I do, and I don't wish ill upon her. I truly don't. I am hopeful that this woman, before she passes away, will be able to accept responsibility for her actions, apologize, and become a better person. I'm hopeful. I don't know if that will happen or not. All right, and I told Ross Sauce this in the comment section, and I don't wish her ill. I've not spoken to my mom for 4 or 5 years. My sister Denise, it's been well over a decade, because my mom is a very toxic, unhealthy person, very abusive, This is a woman who I talk about how people are motivated by love. My mom, I think, is no different. My mom's motivation are often love-based. She wants to test people. Can I do this to you and you will still love me? How much can I abuse you and mistreat you? How many bad things can I do to you and you will still love me? I think that's how my mom gauges love. It's very bad, very bad. I don't know, I know there's other people who experience that type of thing, but it's a horrible existence as a child. As a child, it leaves its mark. It leaves its mark. My dad came from a very good household, very good family. His father was a politician, a well-known member in the community, upstanding member in the community. And of course, he had never been abused or anything else. So he comes into that environment, marries my mom, and it's much like the frog who's in the boiling water. He doesn't know he's being abused. And once he does, how do you overcome that? If you've never been through that, how do you cope with that? If you're dealing with somebody that is mentally abusing you as well as physically, emotionally, verbally, and she did, how do you cope with that? How do you get out of that? And that's what my dad had issues with for many, many years. Every single year that he was married to my mom. But I don't wish her ill at all. I hope that she is. It would make me very happy. It would bring me a sense of peace if she would simply accept responsibility for what she did, apologize, and just talk it through with me. I wouldn't even ask for an explanation of why you did it, because I don't think she understands why she did it. But I would at least like to, I know I did wrong. I know I was a shitty parent. I'm sorry. I don't think I'll get it. I don't think anybody will get it, but it would certainly help make some amends. Dr. Bob on my show, he asked me, hey, will you talk about healthcare? Dr. Bob, I will. I have some healthcare fraud and crime knowledge. Instead of just me trying to do a show like that on my own, what I'll do is I plan on bringing someone in that has some experience with healthcare fraud, and we will do a show together. In the interim, what I will say is there's not a criminal on the planet that gives a damn about HIPAA. They don't care. They don't. I'll also say that, that statistic I give out, that 41% of every single router has the default password, that type of vulnerability absolutely in spades in the healthcare system. First of all, you've got the philosophy of healthcare is to first, do good, make sure that people are being fixed. And I agree with that. But because of that, cybersecurity definitely takes a second seat. And that's unfortunate, because at the same time, you've got a lot of devices on there are being used that maybe they're hard-coded with passwords. Maybe you can't update them because the companies went out of business, or maybe there's some sort of regulation or concern in place that you have to follow before you can apply the update. So it creates this entire threat landscape that attackers can go in and start to install ransomware, shut down devices, any number of things. And we've seen stuff like this. I think that problem is going to get much huger simply because of that philosophy that I mentioned a second ago, that healthcare people are more concerned about making people healthy, about getting them well, than they are about cybersecurity and cybercrime. And because of that, I think they're going to be eaten alive. Certainly, I believe that we are going to get to the point where we're seeing loss of life because of cyber attacks on medical. I have no doubt about that. Before we get to the main show, Crime Pays, before we get there, it's not often that I talk about people that I listen to on the YouTube, or, when people are letting me watch the TikTok or stuff like that. It's not often that I do that. But there's this Canadian dude. He's a psychologist, clinical psychologist. And I have been listening to him. This guy named Jordan Peterson. He's got a shit ton of followers. I like him. I do. I don't agree. Here's the thing again. Just because you're listening to someone does not mean that you have to agree with every single thing that they say. All right. You don't have to be a sheeple. You don't have to listen to somebody to have them tell you what your opinion should be. Your job should be to form your own opinion. You get all this external stimuli and you process it, and you look at the data and everything else, and you form your own educated opinion. I have been listening to Jordan Peterson because when I first heard him, he was talking about accepting responsibility. And I am huge on that in my life. I think that the first key to growing as a human being is taking personal responsibility for your life. Absolutely. And I was giving an interview with Megyn Kelly a few weeks ago, and I had one of these kind of aha moments. She was asking, I had made the comment, my environment, it was my choice to commit the crime. It wasn't my environment that caused me to commit crime. And she's like, well, yeah, but your environment played a role. And at that moment, it occurred to me. And I said it on the show at that point, and I've said it a few times after that point. The thing is that we can allow our environments to dictate who we become, or at some point we can make a choice to decide, hey, no, my environment is not going to dictate who I am and who I become. I'm going to choose to be different. Now, Lord knows it took me a while that I certainly let that environment do that. I chose to let it do that until I decided, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be different. And that's what you see today is, I'm chief criminal officer. I'm an ambassador for AARP. I speak across the planet. I think I do a lot of good. Actually, I know I do. But that's I have a lot of issues with the environment. That childhood that I had growing up with a mom who was a criminal, who was abusive, but not only my mother, every single person on that side of the family was involved in some sort of scams or hustles, fraud. I grew up knowing how to do charity fraud, how to beg for money at a corner, holding a sign, collecting money for X charity, whatever. Insurance fraud, faking stolen cars, faking accidents, burning homes for cash, drug trafficking, illegally strip mining coal. I grew up knowing how to do those things and engaged in those things because when I was a child, that's what the adults in my circle were doing. And here's the thing. When you're a child, you have no choice in that. You are going to do what the adults around you are doing. You may think you ain't, but you are. You ain't got a choice in that shit. But when I became an adult, I had the choice at that point. I could choose to either let my environment continue to dictate who I was and who I became, or I could have chosen, no, I'm not going to do that. My sister makes that choice. She makes the healthy choice at that point. She goes off to university, becomes a teacher, great parent, great citizen. She had actually made that choice before that. But me, I was the guy who chose to let my environment dictate who I was, who I became. And it wasn't until I went to prison, was disowned by my sister, met my wife, Michelle. Finally, the FBI takes me in under their wing. It wasn't until all these things happened that I made the choice to say, no, my environment is not going to dictate who I am. It boils down to responsibility. And that's one of the things that Jordan Peterson was talking about that really, really resonated with me. Personal responsibility. Fix yourself and then worry about fixing the world or whatever problems are going out there. But you got to fix yourself first. And I've said that. I didn't know there's some clinical psychologist out there saying the same shit. And I started listening to him, and I got to say, the way he speaks, that lilt and everything, man, I like that shit. I think he's angry some. I do think the dude comes off as somewhat angry, but I agree with a lot of what he says. Some of what he says, I don't, but a lot of what he says, I absolutely agree with. He evidently got his start talking about, I guess, that Canada was going to institute where you had to refer to someone by whatever gender pronoun they wanted to be referred to. And he took exception to that. He was called a homophobe because of that. He actually explains that in an interview that's been watched like 40 million times. I'll post the link to that in the YouTube comments. But he doesn't come off as a homophobe at all. He simply comes off as somebody that, has an opinion. And I'm fine with that. I don't have to agree with everyone's opinions. My thing on gender, I think the world would be a much better place if we simply let people do what the hell they wanted to, as long as they weren't hurting each other. Now, that being said, that don't mean to pull some crying game bullshit on somebody. It don't mean that. See, I was locked up in federal prison 7.5 years, like maybe 3 years. I was at Fort Worth prison. It's a medical facility. There were like 5 men there that were transgender. And but they weren't really you had a small segment of the prison population that looked down on those people. But by and large, no. I didn't really give a shit. We were doing our time. You do your time. Hey, sometimes we'll break bread together, walk the track, play a game, bullshit, whatever you want to do. We didn't really care. If they wanted to be called a woman, most of us would even do that. Didn't give a shit. All right. There is a line in the sand, though. The line in the sand is that crying game moment. All right. That moment being that, hey, I don't date anybody anymore. But if I were dating someone and we get to that moment of intimacy, and all of a sudden I notice that when this woman is undressing, she has some extra equipment, that crying game moment is what I'm talking about. If anybody's not seen the movie, that's what happens in the movie. The guy don't know, then the guy knows, and the guy's like, oh shit. Well, in the movie, turns out the guy loves the guy. That don't work like that shit in real life. That don't. You pull that shit in real life, somebody going to try to kill you. All right. That's that line in the sand. So I think that my view of that is, hey, let people do whatever they want to as long as they're not harming anyone. But that also comes with a degree of openness, honesty, and truth. Don't hide a bunch of bullshit. Be honest about it, and everything will work out all right. All right, so we're back to the Brett Johnson Show, episode 43, Crime Pays, and it does. I know that, Beretta says don't do the crime if you can't do the time. A lot of people don't even remember the damn show, but the saying has lived on over the years. You hear law enforcement all the time, crime doesn't pay. People in anti-fraud, crime doesn't pay. Let me dissuade you of that lie. Crime absolutely pays. If it didn't pay, you wouldn't have these millions of criminals out there trying to commit fraud all the time. Crime absolutely pays. Absolutely. When I was a criminal, it took a while. It took a few years for me to gain that skill level. But at one point, I was stealing $160,000 a week, 10 months out of the year. I'm not bragging about that. That's a statement of fact, is the only thing that is. Criminals today, they can go on the dark web or one of these criminal marketplaces. They can buy a credit card number for, say, $12. And they can immediately, without much skill, profit, through a product or service, get $500 worth of product or service. And then sell that at 80% of retail, profit $400. So crime does pay. You can engage in refunding fraud. Someone in refunding fraud, and that's simply where you buy, say, a laptop, a cell phone, something like that you can claim it didn't show up. You can claim it wasn't in the retail box, or you can claim that you're going to send it in for a refund and then manipulate the tracking label, the return label, to make it appear that you have sent it in. Company thinks you have, you get to keep the product, and you get the money back at the same time. So that's refunding fraud, and you would think that's not very profitable. I actually did a show about it on my show. You see people that, without really breaking a sweat, can profit an easy $10,000 a month. That's $120,000 a year with doing a minimal amount of work. If you really want to bust your ass on it, you can profit probably, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 a month just on refunding fraud. But you got to bust your ass. And here's the thing. Anyone who ever thought that criminals were lazy, you are completely mistaken. Criminals work their ass off. It's called a criminal lifestyle for a reason. This is not an 8-hour-a-day job. This is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I worked my ass off, and I've never met a criminal yet who hasn't worked their ass off when it comes to living that criminal life. So yes, it's very profitable. It's very profitable. Think about account takeovers, for example. So an account takeover, I can go on Genesis Marketplace. I can get, for a low of $3 to a high of like $400, I can get access, everything that I need to take over someone's cryptocurrency account, their bank account, their credit card account, whatever. I get access to that account, Say I've spent $100 to get the credentials, the cookie, the browser, the login credentials, everything else. Say I've spent $100 for that bot to deliver that unto me, and then the account has several $1,000s in it. Or you may get lucky and it's a cryptocurrency account where the guy's got a few Bitcoins in there. That's how crime profits. It's one of these things where a lot of people think that, at the end of the day, crime does not pay. And I would agree with that to an extent. But even in my life, the criminal activity that I used to engage in has educated me enough that when I did turn my life around, it's very beneficial for the career that I now have, both as a speaker, as a consultant, and as chief criminal officer of Arcos Labs. Without that experience I had committing crime, I wouldn't be able to do the job that I have today. I wouldn't be able to talk with and understand what victims go through and be able to help those victims. So crime continues to pay for me. The people who are out there, I mean, it's if you're a carder, once you get that skill level, you are absolutely profiting. If you think about the pandemic, for example, during the pandemic, fraud numbers exploded. You had people who decided they wanted to try their hand at fraud. The governments had put into effect the stimulus programs. Typically, there was no security around them whatsoever. I was noticing 16-year-olds on Telegram who were bragging about stealing $60,000 a week, committing unemployment fraud. Now, what did that cost for them to commit that unemployment fraud? Well, they had to pay maybe $5, $10 for someone's PII, their social, their date of birth. They had to get a prepaid debit card over at Walmart, say $10. If they had to get that, sometimes they just had to sign on for a Chime or a Cash App account. So it cost them anywhere from $5 up to maybe $20 to commit that type of fraud. Now, what's the profit on that fraud? Well, unemployment fraud, for that $20 investment at the high end, for that $20 investment, the initial deposit to that account was somewhere between $7,000 to $10,000. So absolutely, crime pays. Absolutely it does. It's the biggest lie in the world when you hear somebody say that crime doesn't pay. I mean, it's a horrible lie. And the other lie is that, criminals go to prison. Yes, some criminals go to prison. Most people who are involved in cybercrime will never be arrested. All those people who committed stimulus fraud that, Secret Service and the FBI and everybody's investigating right now, trying to find out who they were, most of those people are never going to get caught. The only people who get caught are the idiots and the people who are at the top of the heap. And here's why. So the idiots, of course, that's easy enough to understand. They simply don't know what the hell they're doing, and they're making stupid mistakes that identify them. For example, they're having the money sent to their real accounts, which was very typical during the pandemic. You had a lot of Paycheck Protection Program fraud where the idiots had the money sent to their real bank account. Easy enough for law enforcement to find those people. For the higher end people, well, those are the sore thumbs that are sticking out. Those are the experts in the field. Those are the best known people. The reason that those people go to prison is that's who law enforcement targets. All right. That's who they're looking for, are those high end names. And the reason is they cannot arrest everybody. There's simply not enough law enforcement agents on the planet to arrest all the criminals that are out there. There's not. When I was committing crime with Shadow Crew, we ended with 4,000 people. Fast forward to 2017, Alphabay, the largest criminal network on the planet, government shuts it down, 240,000 members. Fast forward 2 more years to 2019, Black Market, just a dark web criminal marketplace, gets shut down, 1.15 million members. All of that pre-pandemic. During the pandemic, fraud numbers exploded because the government was giving away money to any criminal who wanted to steal it. No security in place. So those numbers exploded. Now you've got websites that are millions of members large. At the same time, here's a stat for you. In the United States, we've got 37,000 FBI field agents spread across 56 field offices, 37,000 agents. Of those 37,000 agents, only about 200 of them are concentrated on cybercrime. Think about that. Only about 200 concentrated on cybercrime. And of those 200, a lot of them are dealing with nation state attacks and all this other bullshit that goes on. So if you're wondering why a lot of cyber criminals don't get arrested, yeah, add that in, add the numbers of law enforcement, the jurisdictional problems, all these other things that go on. There's your answer. And you've got millions of these people out there committing crime at the same time. And they know how to use technology to keep their identities hidden and obscured. So that's why you can't really arrest your way out of the problem. That's why most criminals, online criminals, never go to prison. If you're one of these guys that's top of the heap, like this idiot right here, like some of the people that I was associated with, yeah, law enforcement's going to put some people on your case. And the chances of them ultimately finding you and giving you prison time, pretty good at that point. But there's so many criminals out there that you cannot arrest every single one of them. Think about it. And sometimes you hear the news. You'll hear a large number of people arrested. Just a few months ago, there was a report about the FBI. They had ran their own phone called the criminal phone, the Crim phone. And the news report said that 800 of these criminals who used this criminal type of device were arrested across the planet. 800. All right. Those were drug dealers. Those were cyber criminals. Those were extortionists. Those were murderers. Those were gangsters. 800 of these people were arrested across the planet. And the initial thought is, hey, shit, that's a whole boatload of people. Good job, FBI. It was a good job, FBI. But is it a whole lot of people? Well, not when you actually read more than just the headline. When you read more than just the headline and went into the story, you see that 800 people were arrested, but there were 3 million criminals using this specific device. Does crime pay? Yeah, crime pays. Absolutely. You profit through the roof committing crime, especially the more versed, the longer you stay at it. The chances of being arrested, not very good, unless you're that guy that wants to be top of the heap. Most criminals are in the shadows. You don't know a lot of their names. They don't come out at all. They don't really talk on the forums or anything else like that. They remain hidden. Those people, you're not going to find those people. You're not going to arrest those people. They're going to continue on profiting as they are. So even though crime does profit, I had a guy on Twitter, for example, last week it was my first day in Hawaii, and he emails me, he direct messages me on Twitter saying, hey, will you do a show about tax fraud? And my thought was, oh, I've not talked about that. Yes, I'll do a show on tax fraud. So I said yes. And then he responds, he was like, well, I really need to know how to do it. I'm like, okay, dude, what's going on with you? And he's like, man, I just don't know what else to do. I'm at the end of my rope. I can't pay my bills. I really need to get some money in here. So I was like, well, man, that's not the proper way to do things. You don't want to be that guy that's breaking the law. You don't want to live that lifestyle. It turns out that this guy, he's got some skill. He's worked with the Border Patrol. He's worked with TSA. He has some security skill. So I told him, I was like, look, man, I said, just, I'm not going to teach you how to break the law. I'm not going to do that. I'm not that guy that does that, but I will try to help you find a job someplace. He's up in New York. So I'm trying to find some sort of work that he can do to pay the bills. That is not uncommon, where you have somebody that really feels that cognitive dissonance, they really feel that they have no other choice except to engage in criminal activity. And the cybercrime platform itself has become so refined these days that somebody that doesn't know anything at all about crime can immediately come in, not have to know anything, and start to profit. They can do refunding fraud, any number of things that puts money in their pocket, and they can actually pay someone to do it for them. So it kind of distances themselves from that moral problem of committing crime. So I was talking to this guy and told him I'd help him find a job. I don't know what to say about that, guys. It's the reason I didn't want the guy to break the law. Would he get caught? Probably not. All right, probably not, because most criminals are not caught. The problem that I had is, and that's the reason I'm doing this show where I say crime pays. The problem that I had with him committing crime is, first, you're victimizing somebody. There's always a victim in a criminal act. You are causing someone harm, period. I didn't want him to do that. All right, because that's if you really realize what you're doing, that you're bringing harm to another human being, I'm not sure how you can live with yourself. All right, that's why criminals, and I was no different, they have to justify, unless they're a sociopath or a psychopath or whatever the hell the thing is, they have to justify their criminal activities. I was no different. I did it for my family. I did it for my sister. I did it for my wife. I did it for my stripper girlfriend. We justify those crimes so that we don't have to face the harm that we cause another human being. I didn't want this guy to do that. All right. I don't want anyone to do that. So I told him, I was like, I'll try to help you as best as I can. I'm trying to help the guy. So crime pays. Crime pays money, absolutely. But crime also pays in ways that you may not want it to pay. In my presentations, I talk about a kid by the name of Jonathan James. And I don't use the word hacker in my presentations. I don't. I call people criminals because that's what we are. We are not hackers. We are criminals. And we need to get past this idea of hackers, criminals, cyber criminals at that. Well, Jonathan James was, as a minor, if there's ever been a hacker, it's been this Jonathan James kid. As a child, he broke into the Pentagon, he broke into the DOD, he broke into NASA, shut the NASA computers down for 6 weeks. Once he gets out of that trouble, he partners with Albert Gonzalez. Albert Gonzalez was my forum techie on Shadow Crew. Albert goes on to be the largest credit card thief in history. He hits Heartland Payment Systems. He hits Dave & Buster's, TJ Maxx. He steals 170 million credit cards. He gets sentenced to 2 20-year prison sentences. Jonathan worked on those breaches with Albert Gonzalez, and he was arrested with Albert. Whether it was true or not, and I've said this and I'm going to say it again, it was probably true, because the truth of the matter is the only really competent criminal in that room was Jonathan James. He knew what the hell he was doing. He had that skill level. Jonathan thought that law enforcement was going to lay the blame of those breaches at his doorstep. So what does he do? He gets up one day, he walks in his dad's bedroom, he gets out the .45, he walks in the bathroom, writes a note, he steps in the shower, and he blows his brains out. And that's Jonathan James. That's how crime paid him. I was asked in Hawaii, I was asked by a lady, hey, what can we do to protect our children? And I told her, my initial response was, I don't know. Then I realized that I did. And my response is, we have to get past the point where we're raising our children with gaming systems, laptops, cell phones, tablets, that we let that raise our children. We have to take an active role in our children's lives. We have to raise them with love. We have to care about what's going on. We've gotten to the point where we're not doing that. And I can't imagine the life, because Jonathan was an extremely intelligent individual. I can't imagine the benefit Jonathan James would have had for humanity if he had had that upbringing. If he had had someone when he was a child take him in under their wing and simply give him some guidance to get him away from cybercrime, to get him maybe into security or whatever the hell else, something beneficial, something that wasn't criminal. He would have been an asset for humanity instead of lying on a slab in the morgue at the end of the day. Crime pays. Yeah, crime pays. You make a lot of money. I'm not going to lie to you. You make a hell of a lot of money. The reason I talked to this Twitter guy and was so adamant about him not breaking the law, the reason I talk to people on Telegram every single day, is because crime pays in ways you don't want it to. You can make money. Yeah, you can make money. You can get out of that hole, but I want to tell you, you're never going to get out of that hole. Crime continues to pay with, because I was the guy who lied to everyone. I lied to myself, I lied to my friends, to my family, to people I knew, people I didn't know. I stole from everyone. Stole from friends, family, people I knew, people I didn't know. And I justified it all. I had that cognitive dissonance. I got to where I didn't care about people. where I didn't, where the most important thing to me was that, and that's still, while I don't victimize people anymore, I still have the residue of those actions. You know, I know who I used to be. You know, people can read the feedback that I get sometimes. I get a lot of positive feedback, but sometimes I don't. And that's complete. And I say it. I'll often respond, "Hey, I understand exactly where the hell you're coming from." That's the type of lifestyle that you have. That's the type of person that you are when you become that criminal. So does crime pay? Yeah, you can make money all day long, all day long. But there's so much other stuff that goes with it. You know, maybe you'll land in prison. Maybe. You don't want that experience because you get to learn how to use the bathroom in front of other people. You get people telling you what to do all the time. You worry about violence, everything else. So, I mean, prison's part of it. It's not a big part. But, you know, just the type of individual that you become, I think that if people really understood that, you know, overcame whatever cognitive dissonance they had at that point in time and really came to an understanding of who they would become committing crime, you know, victimizing somebody else. Because again, there's always a victim. So if you understand, if you make that conscious choice that I'm going to bring harm to someone, I think that I would hope that most people wouldn't do that. Say that's the show for the day, but it's not. It's not. I wanted to talk about one more thing. I'll do a show later on about the misdeeds of law enforcement, how criminals are not the only bad guys. I'll probably do that show this coming Friday. All right. But I wanted to kind of lead into something because when I was committing crime, like I said, I justified my crimes. I said, hey, I did it for my family, for my wife, for my stripper girlfriend, for my sister. And I believed those justifications. When the Secret Service brought me in as an informant / consultant, and I continued to screw them over from inside Secret Service offices, I also blamed the Secret Service for my activities. I said, hey, it's their fault that I committed all these crimes. I don't believe that anymore. The only person who's responsible for my crimes is me. That being said, back in those days when I was working for the Secret Service, I wrote this 17-page letter to the judge. And it detailed a lot of the misdeeds that the Secret Service was doing on the overall investigation. I was one of the people that I had set up and gotten arrested. I wrote him a letter saying, hey, this is the stuff that happened. You know, this is the stuff that you need to know if you will be to take it to trial. You'll probably want to know this before you walk in the courtroom. And it was the misdeeds of those agents. Now, those agents ended up being fired. All right. And what was told to me is they were fired because they trusted me. And that is probably true. All right. But it's also true that this kid, and he was a very good kid. Yeah, he was a criminal, but that doesn't mean he wasn't a good kid. All right. You can be, just because you're a criminal doesn't mean that you're necessarily a bad person. You can still be a good person, or you can be a bad person. I think that this kid was, at heart, he was a good kid. He just, much like Jonathan, just veered off. Didn't have anybody that took him in under his wing. This kid I set him up and got him arrested. And I wrote him a letter saying, hey, you need to know this because this will help you in court. Well, this kid, 2007, he spends a lot of time fighting this case. 2007, he files some FOIA requests, Freedom of Information requests. Files those in 2007. They convict him, sentence him. I guess he gets out of prison, everything else, before he even gets the FOIA request back. They don't actually deliver those FOIA records, those Freedom of Information request records. They don't deliver those until 2014. 2014. And what this kid, he reached out to me again while I was in Hawaii. Well, this kid, he's not a kid anymore. He's overcame everything. It looks like he's an outstanding human being living the straight and narrow. And I'm glad for him. I'm truly glad for him. And I apologized. I apologize for being the piece of shit who set him up. But what this kid told me is he told me that the records that he got in detail every single thing that I had written in the letter to him about those misdeeds of law enforcement, how law enforcement was basically screwing around, not doing things properly in order to build a case against this young man. Now, here's the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is that, and again, I'm going to do a show about the misdeeds of law enforcement all the way around, because we've got a former president right now that's complaining about the FBI. And I think that feeds into it. We've got 3 Arkansas deputies who beat the shit out of a guy who was riding a bicycle just like the day before yesterday, slamming his face in the concrete. And it appears that in this case, with this kid that I had set up, we had even more misdeeds with law enforcement. And certainly I told him what a lot of those misdeeds were. It turns out they lied on the stand about them, everything else. I've not talked about that in years. The only thing I really talked about from that point on was, hey, yeah, these agents, they were supposed to be watching me. Instead of watching me, they decided they were going to watch porn in the same room with me. And once I saw that, I started to break the law. That's really as far as I've taken anything. I've talked about how the Secret Service computers were hacked at one point, some stuff like that, how they shut down, how they had me shut down an entire Canadian law enforcement investigation. I've mentioned that stuff, but I've not really hammered that stuff. And this kid, former kid, reached out to me while I was in Hawaii and touched base with me. And it got me thinking. It did, because just a few days prior, I had done a show where I was talking about the Trump raids and things like that. And I'd said, and here's the thing, I've been very fortunate that I've talked at Quantico. I've got friends in the FBI. I've got friends in law enforcement. The thing is I trust law enforcement. I do. I've got a profound respect for law enforcement. So on some level, I've had some cognitive dissonance about things. And this kid reaching out to me while I was in Hawaii, I think he forced me to get some clarity about it. The thing is that sometimes law enforcement screws up. Sometimes they're so adamant about catching the guy. Make no mistake, I was a criminal. This kid was a criminal. He certainly did the crime. No doubt about it. He did the crime. He'd tell you today he did the crime. Notice I'm not saying his name because he asked me not to. And the guy's turned his life around now, and I'm going to honor that request because, somebody who's actually doing the right thing, they deserve that. They deserve that. And he looks like he's an outstanding human being now. Not a future. On this Friday's episode, I'm going to talk more about that. But yeah, it looks like they screwed him over. I told this kid that I would mention this on this show. I'd actually planned on this show talking about law enforcement corruption as well, but I'd actually shot the show as a whole and it was running way too long, so I decided to separate it into 2, and I wanted to use the end of this show to kind of segue into that. Okay, and I'm going to share more about my experience with this kid. I was very fortunate. I feel very fortunate, very blessed that he reached out to me. He told me that he was actually kind of thankful for me for me doing that, because he would have served a lot more time if I hadn't been the son of a bitch that set him up. And I was very fortunate, and I feel blessed that I was able to engage with him and apologize to him. And I feel that he forgiven me. All right, but I'm Brett Johnson. We'll share more on the next episode. What do we say? We say stay safe, stay secure, and stay vigilant. At the end of the day, this is the Brett Johnson Show, and here's the real thing that matters. At the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. I'm Brett Johnson. Thank you for listening. Until next time.